button expert. Let's try that again.
Rachel Plotnick, Associate Professor of Cinema and Media Studies at Indiana University. My first book is called Power Button, A History of Pleasure, Panic, and the Politics of Pushing.
Oh, perfect! I just happened to be reading Power Button, which is a fascinating deep dive into a technology we encounter every day but hardly ever think about. It's the most 99% invisible thing I've ever read, and somehow isn't an episode of the podcast yet. Get on that, Roman Mars. The book starts in the 1880s with the advent of the push button and explores the ways this technology revolutionized daily life. Back then, it wasn't uncommon for a person to have never encountered a button before, which means you get things like Rough Riders in the big city shooting buttons with their pistols like a Yosemite Sam cartoon.
First of all, in the 1880s and into the 1900s, most people didn't have access to electricity. It wasn't very common unless you were pretty wealthy to have electricity in your home. So one of the earliest ways of marketing buttons was, I call this kind of auto magic, this idea of push a button, this amazing thing happens. And that's one of the interesting things about buttons is that they really are designed to kind of hide the infrastructures and complexities of how any given machine works behind them.
As more of the world was electrified, the ability to control electricity with a button became a bigger and bigger selling point. But advertisers weren't focused on explaining how it all worked, just the amazing results.
Vending machines, cameras, a lot of these early fields that were selling buttons portrayed them as just push the button, you'll get this magical effect. Electricity is a genie that springs forth from the button and you're just going to get whatever it is you want.
This magical era of the button wasn't just about light switches and doorbells, but buzzers to summon waiters and maids. It was a device that allowed people to avoid interacting with others as humans, sort of like food delivery apps today. Other ads highlighted how little labor was needed to press a button. They're so easy, even a woman child can use one. A new technology reinforcing old social hierarchies. Well, I'm sure it'll be the last time.
We kind of begin to see the emergence of what I might call like a haves and have-nots.
There's no retreat now.
Where people who kind of had the luxury or affordance of being able to push a button to call someone or make them do their labor were stratified from those who were kind of doing the labor.
Buttons are really good at making complex things easier to control. Things like labor, or our social lives, or even our health. And just a few decades after buttons came on the scene, there was a growing number of people who thought they made things too easy, because they allowed people to forget the actual labor involved. And they weren't just talking about the bellhop who took your bags, but the chef behind the automat, or the coal miner powering that light bulb. A magical user interface to hide distant labor exploitation. It'll probably be the last time. Definitely. You can see this concern summed up nicely by educator and activist Dorothy Canfield Fisher, who in 1916 said, "The fact that so often in modern America one may press a button and be served seems to relieve one of any necessity for responsibility about what goes on behind the button." She continues, and I'm going to read the rest of this quote in the voice of Immortan Joe from Mad Max Fury Road just for fun.
There is a great danger of coming to rely so entirely on the electric button and its slaves that the wheels of initiative will be broken, or at least become rusty from long disuse.
Despite all the bad stuff buttons can enable, I don't want to banish them to the wasteland. I think the key to using buttons well is to understand the button. So let's start with the basics. Wow, it's just like magic.
The way that a button works, it's designed to open and close a circuit. So when you push it, it's completing the circuit and closing it so that electricity will flow. And then when you let go of the button, it's stopping the circuit and the electricity stops flowing.
I've got a little demonstration circuit here with a battery powering a tiny light bulb. But the circuit is only completed whenever I press the button. The way this works is that when I press the button, it is mechanically pressing down on the switch where a tiny piece of metal is connecting and completing the circuit. When I let go of the button, the circuit is no longer completed and the light goes out.
So there is very much that kind of idea of the digital, the on-off, the same way we might think of ones and zeros in computer programming or any of those kind of binary logics.
The binary logic of buttons made them perfect for manipulating everything from pinball flippers to advanced computers. Advertisements bragged about their plentiful buttons. By the 1950s, buttons were ingrained in the culture. Making someone angry might lead to an accusation of pushing their buttons. And it's never a great sign when someone's thinking about pushing the big red button.
I think I'll push this wet button.
No, not home.
And the idea of buttons as almost magical devices of automation was once again in vogue. So when the first video games were being invented, buttons, in addition to switches and dials, made intuitive sense. Pretty soon, arcades were popping up across the country with chunky joysticks and big, clicky, mechanical buttons. Also around this time, computers, we were just starting to interface with digital representations of buttons. Computers were transitioning from text interfaces into graphical user interfaces, so more people could use computers. And the way they made that easier was by using icons of things people recognized, like folders, trash cans, and buttons. This shift was enabled by Douglas Englart's invention of the computer mouse, which allowed users to click a single real button that could control infinite virtual buttons. When video games became a home consumer product in the 1970s, the button stuck around, but it had to evolve for this new environment. While the iconic Atari joystick is functionally a shrunken-down arcade controller, the guts underneath changed. Instead of tiny switches mechanically completing the circuit, home game controllers use membrane buttons, which rely on a thin, rubbery material that can be compressed until the circuit is completed.
And they have some advantages in the sense that they're very flat, so they don't get dirty as easily, they can't get stuff stuck under them, they don't require, a lot of force or effort to push them.
This allowed buttons to become much smaller, and though the quality was rough at first, membrane buttons were cheaper to manufacture. By the time Nintendo's first home console hit the market, the membrane button had been perfected enough to go to space. It had become the most durable choice, which was extremely important to Nintendo. Since their console was designed to be played right on the floor in front of the TV, its iconic controller needed to withstand being stepped on in the likely event it was left out. Though the D-pad had appeared elsewhere before, including Nintendo's own portable Game & Watch devices, the NES's membrane button layout became the foundation of nearly every controller that followed. The shape of game controllers became more ergonomic and made analog sticks in the 90s, but the most consistent upgrade was more buttons. Nintendo's very next console added shoulder buttons for our index fingers and X and Y buttons on the face. Sega responded by adding even more buttons. The PlayStation's analog sticks could be clicked like a button, and both that console and the Nintendo 64 added trigger buttons to their shoulders. But in the new millennium, buttons finally faced a real competitor, something that's more advanced and adaptable than this archaic, century-old technology: the touchscreen. The touchscreen wasn't new technology. ATMs had been using touchscreens for decades, and we'd had personal digital assistants since the mid-90s.
Hey, Dolph, take a memo on your Newton. Beat up Martin.
But two devices in the aughts helped to make touchscreens truly ubiquitous. The first was the Nintendo DS, which by any definition was massively popular and eased people into the idea of interacting with a touchscreen. There were still tons of buttons, more than enough to just ignore the touchscreen if you wanted to, but it was the training wheels that helped prepare us for a groundbreaking new telephonic device, the LG product, which was technically the first smartphone with a glass-covered capacitive touchscreen. But a month after that was announced, Steve Jobs introduced us to the iPhone.
What we're going to do is get rid of all these buttons and just make a giant screen.
Fun fact, this move to remove buttons could be attributed to Steve Jobs' hatred of the binary on-off logic of buttons because they reminded him of his own mortality. Anyway, it didn't take long for every major smartphone manufacturer to ditch the clicky keypad for smooth glass.
And shortly after the release of the first iPhone, people were beginning to talk about this quote-unquote death of the button. And this was around 2009 when I was a graduate student, and I was really kind of fascinated about what was happening with touchscreens, and were we moving toward this buttonless future, this button-free existence.
Touchscreens absolutely have benefits. They're generally more intuitive than a mouse and can adapt to just about any type of software. Suddenly, a single button can do way more. And once we were manufacturing a billion touchscreen smartphones every year, the cost came down so much that building custom button panels actually became more expensive than just throwing a giant touchscreen in an electric car. It seemed for a time like manufacturers really were intent on killing the button. But what they didn't account for was a backlash.
There are growing calls to re-buttonize from frustrated consumers.
I think that touchscreens are the worst possible interface to put in a car that you still have to drive.
We send off my war rig to bring back
Buttons? Touchscreens are getting the finger for a lot of reasons, and the most serious one is how much attention they require to use. The word touchscreen is a little bit of a misnomer, because while touching it is the way you interact with it, you also must be looking at it while you touch it. Unlike physical, unchanging buttons, a touchscreen cannot be operated only by touch, which means you can't do things like send a text without looking. That's annoying enough, but it's not necessarily dangerous. Unless we, replaced all the buttons in our cars with giant touchscreens. Oh. This is bad, and studies prove it. Interacting with a touchscreen is way more distracting to drivers than good old tactile buttons and knobs.
Reaction times were slower than for drivers who were texting while driving or even intoxicated.
Everyone had gone all in on touchscreens and decided that everything should be a touchscreen, even our cars. I think people initially, as they saw them at work, they thought, oh, she's a button evangelist. She loves buttons. She's out there, fighting the good fight for buttons. I'm quick to tell people, I don't think a touchscreen is good or bad. I don't think a button is good or bad. It really depends on the specific situation that you're going to be using this interface and who you are, what your body is, what context it is that you're using it.
The touchscreen backlash is all about this context. Did this device used to have buttons? Does it function better or worse with a touchscreen? The amount of research and engineering Apple has put into its Taptic 3D touch technology is evidence that even they recognize something tactile is missing from the act of touching a virtual button. And the novelty that the iPhone originally brought to touchscreens is gone. And now consumers are judging them much more holistically. And while I can attest to many such annoying touchscreens in my life, video games aren't really one of them. I have incredibly fond memories of the Nintendo DS, which proved that with thoughtful software, you could do incredible things with a touchscreen. And obviously, playing a game means you already have your full attention on the screen, so that's not an issue, except on the Wii U. I think iPhone games suck when they try to imitate a controller for all the reasons I mentioned about tactile feedback, but it's my preferred device when playing a card-based game like Balatro. It just feels more intuitive to move the cards around that way. But overall, pro-button forces seem to be turning the tide. Some car manufacturers,
like Volkswagen and BMW,
are making it a point to bring buttons back to the dashboard. Apple removed that silly touch bar from their MacBooks and hyped the addition of more buttons on its latest iPhone. And I, personally, am so happy to have a button for turning pages on my e-reader again.
It is fascinating to me how buttons have had this tremendous staying power over time, and that all efforts to get rid of them seem like they kind of perpetually fail. I started out with the death of the button in 2009. Here we are in 2025, and everyone seems to want buttons again. So I do think there's something very enduring about that technology that's pretty fascinating.
So while gamers are much more wise and thoughtful about their approach to touchscreens than most people, it's also undeniable that we love our buttons. While making this video, I've been watching people go absolutely bonkers over this mysterious button on the Switch 2, and it probably just resyncs the Joy-Cons or something. What I'm saying is, we're real button buttons. A perfect example would be the way mechanical keyboards have exploded in popularity. These clicky-clacky keyboards have a number of advantages when it comes to mushy membranes. They're more precise, more comfortable, more easily customized, can last longer, and are more easily repaired. But also, some people just find the click-clack to be a satisfying reason all on its own. And look, I think everyone gets some satisfaction from pressing a good button. Even the membrane buttons in our modern controllers have made huge strides in clickiness and tactile feedback. Plus, they've got even more of them. But if you dive deeper into just about any niche gaming community, you're likely to find real button enthusiasts. Customizing Guitar Hero controllers with mechanical buttons, and retro gaming fans arguing about which modern portables best imitate the Game Boy's D-pad. But perhaps the biggest bunch of button lovers are fighting game nerds. Here, let me show you.
Did somebody ask about fighting games? Did somebody want to know about fighting games?
Hey Pat, what the hell is this?
Oh yeah, that is the first Street Fighter cabinet, which instead of having individual buttons for light, medium, and heavy punch and kick, had two really big buttons that you just had to whack, and depending on how hard you whacked the buttons, a different attack would come out.
Wow, that sounds awful.
Yep, they broke all the time and they never did it again.
All right, but what about this?
Oh, this is my hitbox with beautiful 24mm Sanwa Denshi buttons.
No. I mean, why are there buttons instead of a joystick?
It's for the same reason those first Street Fighter cabinets were not good. There is room for ambiguity with a joystick. This joystick is technically just pushing 4 different buttons inside the controller there. There's no actual button in there for, down left and up right. Those inputs are created by pushing both of those buttons at the same time, which you do by moving the stick. But with a hitbox, those buttons that are actually inside your joystick are just fully exposed right here, and you can have your fingers over them at all times, so your inputs can be faster and more precise.
Fighting games require frame-perfect precision at the highest levels of competition, and this means eliminating any ambiguity in the interface. It's the same idea behind mechanical keyboards or those custom Guitar Hero controllers. This concern with ambiguity may not be the way most people think about it, but it's also what makes touchscreens so infuriating. When you need to turn on your wipers in a rainstorm, you don't want the controls to be ambiguous. It's a new dimension to the earliest debates about buttons and the fears that they obscure what's going on behind them. And I think that's what's different about gamers' approach to buttons and touchscreens. We actually want to know what's going on behind our buttons. We're willing to customize our mechanical keyboards and learn a whole new way to play fighting games if it means feeling more closely connected with our games. And what's cool to me is that the buttons in those modern boards still pretty much function like the ones from a century ago. You press a switch and complete a circuit. It's no wonder people thought these things were magical. Press it faster than you. Like, send a text without looking. I guess you can. Skill issue.
Hey there, Captain. Do you enjoy the idea of manning your very own spaceship to traverse the stars? Do you enjoy the idea of defending yourself from pirates, rebels, and other space entities that are conveniently not protected by the Geneva Convention? Do you have mild to severe autism? I know I do. And if any of those things applied to you, if you're anything like me, you'll probably love Faster Than Light. Faster Than Light is a spaceship simulation roguelike where you are the captain of your very own Federation starship. With the help of your tech and your trusty crew, you can fly from planet to planet, help peaceful alien life, combat those who try to disrupt that peace, and boldly go where no man has gone before. Well, that's the ideal anyway. Unfortunately for you, Captain, you happen to be on the losing side of a war. The Federation is losing its grip to a rebellion, and you're deep in what's quickly becoming rebel territory. But Varrock, I hear you cry, why are the rebels taking over? Are they justified? Who exactly are the good guys here? Captain, you know better. You went through the same Federation Academy training that I did. Don't ask questions. The premise of Faster Than Light is simple and to the point. You have information that will lead to the downfall of the rebellion. Information that cannot be transferred by wireless communications, apparently, and you're a long way from home. Make it to the Federation base in one piece and tell them what you know before it's too late. The Federation has lost a lot of ground in this war already. They've retreated all the way to their home base in Sector 8, and you're in Sector 1. It's a perilous journey, Captain. The rebels will be chasing from behind, and the things in front of us aren't much nicer. There are pirates, violent mantis people, violent mantis pirates, and slug things, and glowing hippie space vegans. Ugh. But if you survive to the end, you'll take on the final challenge, the Rebel flagship. The information you carry suggests that destroying this flagship will cripple the Rebel fleet. Take this massive lad out in 3 phases, Captain, and you'll be a hero. Get taken out yourself, which might happen a lot, and you'll have to start from the beginning. The destination of Faster Than Light is the final boss, and it's an intense and engaging fight. But the journey there can be even more fun and memorable, and that's where Faster Than Light excels. Even if you fail in your mission, there's always plenty of fun things to explore and experience along the way. The goal is always the same, to make it to the end and beat the boss, but the strategy you use to get there can be different every single time. Upgrade your weapon system to utilize a powerful arsenal that can cut across entire ships. Or next time, teleport your bloodthirsty bug people directly into the enemy captain's bedroom. Or roleplay Jeff Bezos and hurl your Amazon drones straight through the walls of their ship. The game's about a decade old now, but with all these ways to play and with literally hundreds of random events to experience, I keep coming back to it. This game deserves more attention, and I am here to provide. I love Faster Than Light. You should play it, and I want to tell you why. First thing you'll do is start a new game and choose your vessel. Part of Faster Than Light's replayability comes from its variety of playable ships. There's 10 of them to choose from, and each ship has 2 or 3 individual variations on top of that. Most ships can be unlocked by simply beating the game. Every ship comes equipped with different weapons, too. Usually either lasers, missiles, or beams, but more on weapons later. Some ships, instead of traditional weaponry, are built with the intent of boarding hostile ships, attacking them with drones, or bombs that cause fires, or anti-bio laser weapons that don't even damage ships, they specifically just fucking murder people. But let's not kid ourselves, I've never read the Geneva Convention, and neither have you, so I'm sure it's fine. The variations of each ship are unlocked by achievements specific to that ship. For example, the Mantis Cruiser has achievements primarily relating to crew-on-crew melee combat, because the Mantis are bloodthirsty maniacs who deal the most melee damage in the game. But until you unlock some other options, you'll be starting with the Kestrel. You may notice that other ships you unlock come with augmentations as well. These are based on the ship's lore. To use the Mantis as an example again, the Mantis Cruiser comes equipped with Mantis Pheromones as a ship augmentation. With this augmentation, everyone on the ship is constantly breathing in those pheromones, making them 25% faster and 25% hornier for giant bugs. Up to you how you deal with that, Captain. Each ship also comes with crew members of varying alien races. The one thing they have in common common is that they can operate and man the systems of your ship to enhance your vessel's capabilities, Captain. And the longer you have them manning that system, the better they'll get at it. You'll want to protect your skilled crew members, Captain. They may be strange-looking alien weirdos that eat metal, rocks, and sometimes other people, but understanding their quirks and differences will be vital to succeeding in your mission. So I'm gonna run them all by you real quick. Welcome to Varrock-splaining, where I aggressively explain video games to unsuspecting women. You may notice there isn't a woman with me today. She's fine, she's right over there.
Hi.
That's because this time, you're the woman I'm gonna Varrock-splain to. How does it feel, huh? How do you like it? Alright, calm down, you degenerate. You don't have to get that into it. Now, you may be wondering, if you're the one I'm going to Varrock-splain to, how is this segment different from any of the rest of the video? Good question, baby. It's not. Humans! The game describes humans as common and uninteresting. They're the baseline for stats in the game, and their only specialty is learning skills slightly faster than other races. But when you're sitting in the captain's chair surrounded by your crew full of specialized alien weirdos that only do one thing particularly well, don't come crying to the humans wishing you had someone who could do many things particularly mediocre. Angie! In the grim darkness of the far future, nanomachines have gained sentience and taken the form of a walking toaster with a caulk gun. But with human lungs, because despite being robots, they can still choke to death if you lock them in a room without oxygen. Don't ask me how I know that. NG repair twice as fast as everybody else, so they're great to have in a pinch when your ship takes damage. But the nanomachines that make up the NG's bodies never figured out how to properly make a fist. They do not harden in response to physical trauma. NG deal half damage in melee combat, and every other species easily steals their lunch money because of it. Mantis! These guys are the ones stealing the NG's lunch money. Mantis are a little bit faster than everybody else and deal the most damage in hand-to-hand combat. However, they are terrible at repairs and cannot be relied on to fix anything. Mantis slaver ships often have an NG on them for this very reason, because, as it turns out, nanobot hands can fix things faster than bug hands with no fingers. Rockmen! Much like some of the redneck friends I had in high school, Rockmen are tanky, rectangularly shaped, a little slow, and immune to fire. A diet of pure bush light drilled fresh from the Rockmen homeworlds has made these guys bloated, immovable objects. They have 150 health instead of 100 and are great in a bar fight, as long as the fight comes to them. Don't ask them to run anywhere. They don't know how. Drinking bush light may be good for bulking and maybe makes you immune to fire, but it does not make you good at cardio. Zoltan! The only glowing energy beings in the universe that somehow aren't feds. The Zoltan are the most useful crew members you can have in terms of energy management, because they provide a free bar of power to whatever system of your ship they're standing in. Their only real downside is that they're fairly squishy. Although they do regular damage in combat, they only have 70 health. Because of this, you generally want them manning and powering important systems while avoiding combat. However, they also explode when they die. So, if you want to get wacky with your three-letter agents, get a clone bay and a teleporter. Then enjoy your rotating door of exploding glowies deposited directly inside the enemy's walls. Slug!
Don't trust them. Don't let them on your ship. I don't care. Oh, they can't get mind control. Oh, they can see things without sensors. Every fucking ship has sensors. Don't go to the Slug World Nebulas. They're gonna bend you over when nobody can see you, and then they're gonna...
Lanius! The Lanius do not play well with others. And by others, I specifically mean people who need to breathe air to live.
Crystal!
These guys are the long-lost cousins of the Rockmen. The most notable feature of the Crystal Men is that they are the only crew members in the game with an active ability called Lockdown. Activating Lockdown barricades the room they're in with crystals, preventing anybody from getting in or out for 12 seconds.
Hey, Freak Show! You're going nowhere! I got you for 3 minutes! 3 minutes of playtime!
Anyway, it's time to head out on your mission, Captain, so pick a ship and give it a name. You use one fuel every time you jump from one of these points on the map. The rebels are going to be encroaching from the left and slowly taking over the entire sector every time you make a jump. But the idea here is to get as many chances to encounter random events and combats as you can. These moments will give you chances to gain scrap, aka that fat cash, as well as weapons, extra crew members, and as many other resources as possible. So you want to visit as many points on the map as you can before you hit the exit without the rebels touching you, and without wasting fuel by visiting the same points repeatedly if you can help it. How fast will the rebels approach? Well, they'll get about that much closer every time you jump. But Varrock, I hear you cry, how do you measure that distance that the rebel fleet approaches precisely? How do I know for sure how many jumps I can make? I'm glad you asked, Captain. I use a very methodical scientific method, sometimes referred to in Latin by our experts as eyeballing it. Do your best, Captain. But don't worry, if you do land on a point on the map that's controlled by the rebel fleet, it's not the end of the game. You're just in for a tough fight where you're almost guaranteed to take some chip damage. The speed of the rebel fleet can be delayed slightly by traveling through areas covered in nebula. Take advantage of these when needed, but keep in mind that it's sort of like taking a shortcut through the back alley. It's dark, your sensors won't work, so it's hard to see, but you'll probably make it out the other end unscathed with some time saved. But it's a risk, because there's always a chance that an ion storm will disable your shields, and then a slug person will violate your anus. So pick your route, Captain, and good luck. We're all counting on you. Along your journey, you're going to encounter a myriad of planets and other ships that want things from you. For example, you arrive to a planet that is in extreme distress. Why? Well, giant alien spiders. If you ask me, they're failing to turn lemons into lemonade here, but let's not worry about that for a second. You can decide to help them or refuse. If you refuse, you gain nothing, but you also lose nothing. If you try to help, you could gain precious scrap and resources you need for your journey. But you may also lose a man to a broken pelvis. Faster Than Light is filled with situations like these, and they're your decisions to make, Captain. This is just one of the simpler ones. You'll learn as you play that these random events can sometimes have special blue options. For example, if you have an anti-bio beam, you can solve the planet spider problem with no risk, just pure reward. You'll get these blue options for having things like a specific weapon, a specific race of alien crew member, or even a certain level of upgraded system. For example, certain random events reward you for having an Engi on board who can explain to you that the two ships smashing together that you just encountered are not fighting, but simply engaging in a steamy mechanical union, in the missionary position with the lights off and their sensors closed, just like the Omnissiah intended. Because of your Engi's knowledge, you'll be rewarded for knowing better and not interrupting them. But basically, you'll have a lot of choices to make. If you're indecisive, you could always look up every choice and its consequences on the internet. That is, if you were a little bitch. Of course you're not, though, because you're watching this video. Another important aspect of Faster Than Light's exploration is something I'll refer to as resource management. Sounds exciting, I know.
Bro, you play the latest COD? It's got crazy resource management. Yes, dude! Ugh.
Scrap metal is gained by beating other ships in combat, or as a positive result from random events, and it serves two purposes, as currency and as the building blocks of your ship. As currency, scrap is used reliably at stores and unreliably in random events. There's usually a couple stores per sector, sometimes more. You'll see them if you're one jump away from them, just like distress signals. Stores will always have the basic resources available for purchase, like fuel, missiles, drones, and the repair service to heal your ship. You can sell items to them as well, at a fraction of the cost, if you need a little bit of extra cash. But the rest of their selection is randomized. You might be able to buy a weapon or a drone schematic. You could even pick up one of the many laborers waiting outside this space Home Depot. Some of them have skills, and some don't, but they're not priced based on that. In Faster Than Light, people are priced based on the inherent value of their race. All humans cost the same, all Zoltan cost the same, and so on. This human here is Brian. He's got a 5th grade reading comprehension and no discernible talents, but boy, you pay that 45 scrap and he'll be yours for life. But let's say you've got a lot of scrap and that there's no stores in sight. You already passed a couple of them and they're too far gone now. The rebels already got to them. They're selling them cold hot dogs and Engi slaves or whatever. In this case, you should use the scrap to tune up your own ship, Captain. Specifically, scrap is used to upgrade systems of your ship, like the piloting, the doors, or any other room with something in it. Every system gains higher benefits the more it's upgraded. So upgrade your shields and make yourself impenetrable, or upgrade your engines instead. Remain still tantalizingly penetrable, but harder for the enemy to try to penetrate in the first place. Or upgrade your weapons so that you can violently penetrate the enemy first before they can do it to you. But importantly, always remember to upgrade your reactor, the thing that gives your ship power, or else you won't be able to get these systems up in the first place. You should be upgrading your systems frequently. If you get lucky, you may even encounter certain random events where you can get a deal on an upgrade at a steal of the price. But with all these upgrades to make and Home Depot stragglers to buy, how am I gonna get enough scrap, Varrock? Well, like I said, dear Captain, you can get scrap by solving people's problems and trying to help them when they throw up the distress beacon and random events and all that good stuff. But there's a more lucrative method of gaining scrap in Faster Than Light. A secret only the pros know about, Captain, called Incredible Violence. Faster Than Light will reward you for a healthy amount of psychopathy, but don't feel too bad about it. Any life form you encounter that's sentient enough to pilot a ship is sentient enough to aim a missile at you. Even if they do give you an option to simply leave, they still could attack you, and that's all the justification you need to defend yourself, Captain. Mostly because there's scrap and rewards at the end of each combat, so it's worth picking a lot of fights. But feel no remorse about it, Captain, even if you need to shoot a beam through a crowd of alien babies in a fleet to ensure your safety. Wink. Enemy combatants will often plead for their lives when their ship reaches low health. Usually, a surrender reward will have a higher proportion of fuel, missiles, and drone parts than the reward you get for simply blowing them up. But blowing them up gets you more scrap. Rarely, a surrendering ship will offer an item with their plea deal. This is almost always worth taking because you can sell the item for a large amount of scrap on top of what they're already giving you. Or use it, of course, if possible. But usually, you'll want to ignore their cries and just blow them up. Don't worry, they're just pirates, or rebels, or bystanders. I don't know, they're not part of the Federation, not our problem. What's more, is there's actually an even higher reward for finishing combat by killing the entire crew instead of just blowing their ship up. Easier to gather resources from a ship that isn't in multiple pieces after all. Just don't mind the multiple pieces of the eviscerated people you'll need to step over to achieve this. Most weapons are projectiles, which always have a chance of missing, but the traits vary from there. Another offensive option is the teleporter. Equip this system to your ship and you'll be able to send your own crew members to the enemy ship to murder them with their own hands. Drones can be used offensively as well as defensively. There are drones that shoot down projectiles and others that'll help you repair systems. There are even ones that'll help you combat intruders. Speaking of combating intruders, let's talk about the most powerful system in the game. It's called doors. Now, for people who haven't played Faster Than Light before, I know what you're thinking. Varrock, how could doors be the most powerful defensive tool when I literally could have a robot that kills people? Well, let me show you a very common example. Pirates board your ship. They attack your systems. They attack your men. You gotta do something about this, Captain. See these funny little doors that connect to the outside? They're called airlocks. I think you see where I'm going with this. Basically, upgrade your doors once or twice and throw one of your guys in the door system to really lock things down when you need to. With that, you can then funnel your intruders around like a little ant farm as the vacuum of space chases them, and you'll never need to throw a punch. Now that's the most important system, but the most important tool, your most important strategic option in the entire game, both offensive and defensive. It's equipped on every single ship in the game, but only the pros know how to use it. I'm gonna tell you about it, Captain. I'm gonna blow your mind right now. So take your biggest, strongest finger and slap it down on the spacebar. It's a pause button. It pauses the game. You can plan out all your actions while paused. Aim your weapons, move your men around to other rooms. The enemy can't do anything about it. Captain, we can't play fair. That rebel fleet doesn't accept surrender, and we don't accept making any real-time decisions. Faster Than Light is a fantastic game. It is perfect in its simplicity. The indie dev team that made it, Subset Games, went on to make another great game after this called Into the Breach, which happens to have a couple of Faster Than Light Easter eggs hidden within it. I recommend Into the Breach as well, and I'd wager to say it's as well designed and fun as Faster Than Light is. So maybe I'll cover that game someday too. Subset Games has only made 2 titles, and they're both golden. That's a 100% win rate, baby. For as many hours as I've played and enjoyed it, Faster Than Light is worth a lot more than $10. Buy it, play it, and enjoy commanding your starship, Captain. Try not to blow up too many times, but even if you do, you'll have fun while doing it. Faster Than Light is great. I highly recommend it. Thanks for watching, everyone. I like Faster Than Light a lot, and I hope I've done it some justice with this video. I hope you enjoyed watching it too. And a special thank you to my shady cabal of video elites and connoisseurs. Your blood money funds production of these videos. There's been so many of you joining lately that I actually have to talk a little more here to make the credit section longer.
Multiverse is a complete conversion mod of FTL Faster Than Light. It's a total overhaul that adds more everything. More weapons, more crew, more events, more endings, way more ships. Maybe too many ships. Maybe you've seen a cool streamer start up the game. Can't think of anyone in particular, but you know, I bet they're out there. Starting Multiverse can be overwhelming, especially if you're not intimately familiar with FTL beforehand. With that in mind, let me give you a quick primer on what you need to know, what you need to do, and what you might not want to do, but should try anyway. This is going to primarily cover Multiverse, so we won't be covering fundamentals of unmodded FTL. FTL has an astronomical skill ceiling, but you don't need to reach the peak to win or enjoy the game. If you want a beginner's primer to unmodded FTL, I can't recommend Mike Hopley's Beginner's Guide to FTL enough. I'll echo his first advice and recommend you give Multiverse a few runs before you take anything in this video too seriously. Having some context for the advice I'd give helps more than you might think. I'm Extra Shoddy. I've played this mod a fair amount. Welcome to FTL Multiverse. To install Multiverse, you'll need a copy of FTL already on your computer. This can be either from Steam, Good Old Games, the Humble Store, your friend's sketchy USB drive, and so on and so forth. Go to Subset Games' website, find the thread for Multiverse, and download the necessary files. I'll link the current thread in the description. You can install the add-on manually, but I recommend using the built-in installer. It can save you a lot of time and frustration. There's a number of resources on Multiverse's official Discord, which is linked to the description as well. If you have trouble installing, look there. Base FTL is especially punishing if RNG doesn't go in your favor or if you're still learning the game. Multiverse irons this out by making the early game a bit more forgiving. Upon starting a run, you'll be offered a free weapon, crewmate, or supplies, which evens out the difficulty for ships that might be missing one of these. The first sector you'll enter is the Multiverse Drop Point, which has some key locations for starting up your run. The supply beacons on the map give reliable early fuel, missiles, and drone parts. Sylvan, your friendly neighborhood arms dealer, will give you a free item and some scrap just for visiting him. If you have some spare supplies, he'll take them off your hands and pay you for the trouble as well. These are good ways to kickstart your early upgrades, of which I highly recommend getting a second layer of shields, or 4 levels of shields. 2 layers goes a long way in preventing early damage, and scrap you don't spend on repairs is scrap that makes you stronger. Multiverse tends to be generous with opportunities to gain weapons, drones, or crew, so don't worry too much about buying them early on. The Rebel Elite at the exit beacon is guaranteed to drop an item after its defeat, so make sure you reach the exit before the encroaching fleet overtakes it. Every time you enter a new sector, you'll typically be greeted with the sector's guard. Depending on the hostility of the sector, you'll either get the chance to request or demand help, or be given the choice to fight them. These guards are typically stronger than most ships in their sector, so it's usually a good idea to hold off on fighting them until you're confident in your ship. You can gain some extra rewards from some of them if you defeat them while leaving them intact, but this is fairly difficult, and not something I recommend unless you are very confident in your boarding or crew killing setup. Certain factions will keep track of your reputation, which measures whether you've been naughty or nice to them in a given run. Unfortunately, what constitutes naughty or nice is arbitrary. Harmony really didn't appreciate you stopping their war crimes. In general, attacking and threatening sector guards will lower your reputation, and doing certain quests for them will improve your reputation. If your reputation is too low, some bases may refuse to support you or attack you upon entering the associated sector. If you remember anything, remember this. Don't pick up the flowers. Occasionally, you'll be offered coordinates to new sectors via events. These coordinates will allow you to reroute your ship from its current destination to a hidden sector. These sectors typically have difficult encounters, but also have unique crew and unlocks, ones that typically cannot be found elsewhere. Quite a few cruiser unlocks are tied to these sectors, so take these opportunities when you're offered them. playable races and variants of Multiverse can change how you run your ship, and they're worth understanding as you recruit them. Orchids supply oxygen to your ship and buff any crewmates within the same room. Free Mantis have an active ability to fight enemy crew, but my personal favorite have to be the Separatist NG. These NG have slightly better offense, slightly worse repair speed, but most importantly, the ability to go into nanite mode, giving them immunity to mind control and suffocation, letting them take significantly less damage in crew combat, but removing their ability to repair, fight, and heal. These last characteristics are blessings in disguise, as it makes fighting mind-controlled crew much safer until it wears off. Back at the Rebel Elite in Sector 1, you may have noticed that their crew seemed a little too beefy. That's because they were elites. Many playable races now have elite variants with improved stats or extra abilities. As your run progresses, you'll start seeing them on stronger enemy ships, and if you're savvy, you may also have the opportunity to recruit them. If you see crew you don't recognize, don't hesitate to pause and mouse over them. You can see a short description of them and their unique traits. Multiverse gives you far more direct control over crew movement, and you can move them to any individual tile within a room. In addition, mind-controlled crew and boarding drones can be toggled to manual control, letting you use them like any other crew. The freedom to position your crew gives you a lot of control over how damage is distributed during hand-to-hand combat, and it's a good idea to familiarize yourself with positioning them against enemy crew, especially depending on room size. Certain drones and weapons have toggles, which give them alternate modes to operate in the middle of a fight. You can swap them with a button in the top left, alongside drone and mind control automation. If you're wondering about the absence of a particular drone or weapon from base FTL, chances are they've been merged with another. Most combat-oriented crew drones have a boarding or defense mode, which place them on the enemy ship or yours, respectively. Boarding drones are stronger in general in Multiverse, as defeating a ship without destroying it will refund any boarding drones within it. If you're not confident in your ship's ability to destroy ships regularly, or want to supplement your boarding crew, boarding drones can be surprisingly potent, especially with the Drone Booster Augment, which can be applied internally. Augments in base FTL were hit or miss. You took them if they were offered, but they typically weren't worth paying for. With some exceptions, of course. Multiverse takes a fairly different approach to them, and while new augments are still available from shops and events, most of the base game's augments are now available through the internal upgrade menu. These cover a wide range of functionality, from extinguishing fires, resisting ion damage, to halving the consumption of your missile launchers. The pre-igniter is conspicuously missing, but you can't have everything in life, though it's not as though it's completely absent. There are a few new augments present here, which give you a few more options when
free whenever you need them for life. Just pay shipping and processing, but you gotta call now.
Alright, fine, we'll talk about it. You can buy any of the arms from the original FTL as internal upgrades, but only one at a time. It may be incredibly tempting to take the scrap arm as your first upgrade, but you don't need it. You don't need it. There's a greater emphasis on crew personalization in Multiverse, and the onboard lab gives you extra control over this. Any ship can buy this with some extra resources, but ships with a medbay, level 2 or higher, can receive it for free. With it, you can add or change certain characteristics of your crew. These can include buffs to combat, repair, health, or resistance to debuffs or hazards. Any of your crew of that race, including variants or elites, all share this change, unless the upgrade is specific to that given variant. Upgrades like suffocation immunity to NG and increased power from Zoltan are great, but some races have truly ridiculous buffs. Non-corporealism completely removes a phantom's ability to fight, and that's a good thing. Why, you may ask? Because now there's nothing left to distract them from sabotaging. No life support system will go unmangled. Too long has man suffered the shackles of the Krebs cycle. When we move past the ozone layer, we move past the need for our lungs. Multiverse features a few ships without any oxygen systems present, and this gives us a dilemma. You need oxygen for most crew to survive on your ship, and while medbays can serve as a guest room, you still need crew to run it. But most isn't all. There are a handful of anaerobic species who can serve as crew, and when you run a ship that doesn't need oxygen, you start noticing a few perks. Boarding crew can't survive long enough to sabotage your systems, fires can put themselves out, and breaches lose half of their sting. They're still very annoying, however. The icing on the cake is letting go of oxygen frees up space for a new system. Let's talk about some of the crew you can use on oxygen-free ships. Lanius were the original species to forego the need for air, and work similarly in Multiverse. Ghosts, also called phantoms, are naturally resistant to hazards and can sabotage systems incredibly quickly. Orchid caretakers are immune to suffocation and can extend that immunity to the rest of your crew in the same room. Engie and Crystal crew can obtain suffocation immunity via the onboard lab as well, but there's one race in particular that makes anaerobic ships worthwhile. Meet the Morphs. They're the creations of a mad scientist you may or may not meet, designed to replicate your crew, and even your drones. We care about the latter. Technopaths can replicate nearly any crew drone in your inventory. Meet Asshole. He's a robot pirate captain. Can you guess what else he is? A surgeon. These morphs can turn into robot pirate captains, and I have a lot of morphs.
How many assholes we got on this ship anyhow? Yo!
Press this booty, 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 press this booty.
I can assure you, I'm very normal. Thanks for watching. Special thanks to Kix, AZR, and the rest. FTL Multiverse heavily expands the amount of playable crew, enough so that it can be overwhelming to figure out how they work. But that variety brings forth opportunity, and the crew, both new and returning, have quite a few worthwhile talents.
Alright, that's going to be it for the Strong Good Luck of Huntex watching on the next time.